Welcome to Coffee, Eggs and Inspiration. It's a weekly show that goes out over YouTube and as a podcast over all of the major channels. And each week I get to sit with an inspiring person and listen to them tell their story and share it with all of you. This week is no different. I'm joined by Shama Hyder. Welcome, Shama.
Thanks so much for having me, Craig. Pleasure to be here.
Shama is the CEO of Zen Media, which is a digital marketing and PR company, best-selling author, 2 books, The Zen of Social Media Marketing, and a second one called Momentum, How to Propel Your Marketing and Transform your Brand in the Digital Age. A keynote speaker who has shared the stage with the likes of the Dalai Lama and President Obama, LinkedIn top voice in marketing 4 times, Forbes top 30 under 30, as well as Business Week top 30 under 30, and started out from nothing. And look at you now. So welcome. It's a real pleasure speaking with you. Tell us how you got started. Where did it all begin and why social media?
Well, thanks for that, Craig. And I genuinely believe if I can do it, anybody can do it. You just have to have a lot of persistence and not be afraid to roll up your sleeves. So yeah, it's so funny. You know, I think back to the days I started off and it was such a different world. And I know you know what I'm talking about. Many of our viewers and listeners might too, where, you know, even just 10 years ago, the pandemic, everything that's happening right now has accelerated things. But even 10 years ago, you know, the world as we know it didn't exist, right? Just technology wise. And I did my thesis, my master's thesis on social media when it wasn't even a phrase. It wasn't a thing. It was specifically, I did it on Twitter, and Twitter had 2,000 users. So really early days for the platform. People would say, you know, what's Twitter? What's the what's the bluebird logo? So extremely early days for social. And of course, it's been, you know, really amazing to see how the landscape has evolved. And when I graduated, I thought I would do what you're supposed to do, which is go get a job. And that wasn't happening for me, not just because, you know, when I graduated, this was sort of the worst recession we'd seen in 08, 09, if you kind of remember that time period. And, you know, graduating and not seeing any jobs. And I had a master's and I was so excited about this new upcoming space. And I just saw so much potential is what made me, you know, start my own company when I started Zen Media. So arguably, we're one of the first social media firms out there because it didn't exist, right? Ended up writing the Zen of Social Media Marketing because there were no books, there were no primers that people could pick up to understand. And now in its 4th edition, it's used as a textbook in colleges around the world to teach the subject. So it's been really fascinating to kind of see that trajectory happen and to get to be a part of it, right? To get to be a part of that world, which is constantly changing and evolving. And I know you know what I'm talking about. So it's been a lot of fun. You know, started out, worked with pretty much anybody who would want to give us a shot at helping them like navigate the digital waters. And of course, you know, now we work with some amazing brands. We've had such a powerful, interesting sort of journey riding the wave, if you will, in many ways. And I genuinely believe we're just getting started. You know, I think we're just scratching the surface with what it means to be taking advantage of the digital world. I think we're just scratching the surface. And I think even the definition of social media has evolved so much because it used to be like people used to use it to refer to networks, right? Like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, like these are your social networks. But really, I think today it's much more like the state of the internet. Like how is, you know, it's just shorthand for how do you communicate with your audience digitally. So yeah, so that's sort of my story and how I got started into it, and you know where I feel like we're now, and it's just so exciting because it's rare to be in something, you know, almost 15 years in and still feel like it's just getting started.
Well, it kind of is. It's new every day and every week, isn't it? And you know, 2,000 subscribers or users in Twitter, that is really early days. Those are the days where social media were message boards and the like, and a little bit of file sharing and that sort of thing. I mean, what was social media or digital marketing in those days? Because that's very early on.
So I think a lot of it was, you know, we've gone from, I think, a place of trying to tell people like, hey, this has benefits, right? Like I think there was a lot of education on why it's important. Right? Why digital? And I feel like now, for the most part, I hope that we're not having that same conversation. Now it's much more the how part of it. Like, not, I get it. Before it's like, this is where your customers are going. And it's like, are they really? And you're making a case for that. Where now you look at it and like, and you look at brands and like, yeah, we know this is where our customers are. And, for us at Zen, we work predominantly with B2B and tech companies. So it's amazing to see that kind of progress as well too, right? Where it's not just something that kids do, it's for younger people, or it's for none of that. It's how all of us make decisions and make purchase buying decisions, whether they're B2C or B2B. And so I think that's where the conversation has really shifted more, is this idea of like, okay, why should I be doing this, to how should I be doing this? How do I connect the dots? I also think there is almost an obsession with connecting the dots, right? And it's just funny because it's like, I think for a while, because of all the analytics available, and not that we don't have that anymore, but I think it lulls people into, like, the bar is so high for the numbers that you can get, that I think the natural next step is like, how do I connect these numbers? How does this make sense? But it doesn't always work that way. So very recently, I've become obsessed with like what I call the messy middle, right? And it's actually you guys, Google, who put out a report talking about that very thing, which I thought was so fascinating, because I was like, yes, this puts into pictures what I've been talking about, which is essentially to say people are constantly evaluating products, buying, there's all this happening, but while that's happening in sort of a circular funnel-esque fashion, there's something greater around it, right? Like the exposure and how often someone is seeing the brand and building that trust that essentially leads to the purchase. But that messy middle where the magic happens is hard to measure. It is hard, but it's more important than ever that, we don't ignore that. So anyway, it's sort of a long answer to your question.
Well, I'm so grateful for you to mention the messy middle. I never thought I'd hear that, but yeah, I mean the assumption, I suppose, is that there's a very sort of direct and linear line between the point at which a consumer like you and I, start on the journey. I want to buy X, and then they make the purchase, and you sort of imagine this as a straight line, but it's not at all. The evidence is literally the metaphor there, the messy middle. There's a constant sort of circulation between evaluation and exploration and comparing options. So if you're not really across these surfaces, and there are many that we dip into, social media platforms, search, YouTube, and other video platforms, outdoor, then you're probably missing something, and the competitors are there instead of you. Wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing that. You talk a lot also about content marketing. Can you tell me more about that? What do you mean by content marketing, and why is it important?
Well, maybe you've heard of this small company called Google that is right. Yeah, I mean, look, content marketing it's again, when we think about how we communicate, how we consume information, we're constantly making decisions. And so part of what I always tell our clients too is the world that you live in today, it's not about, it's funny because you come from an older era, and I mean older era like the 40s and 50s, and you look at that era, you come from a perspective of like trade secrets, right? Like whoever controls access has power. Well, today access is very, it's very democratized, right? Everyone has access. And that's why I made that little joke about Google, which is like, there's almost nothing you can't find something out about. Like it's not, and throughout history, you even look at the church. I love history in general. So when you look at whoever's held power, they've controlled access. But today, where access belongs to sort of everyone, I think the power really comes from who can out-educate their customers, right? How can you out-educate your competitors, right? And be able to reach your customers with that messaging. And so part of it is the more you share, the more you succeed. It's a little counterintuitive to how we've lived through history, which is more about, the hoarding information, or this is our trade secret. This is now more about you actually show people, how the secret sauce is made. So it's less about the secret sauce and more about that openly sharing and inviting people to be a part of it. So I think content marketing tends to be incredibly powerful in that regard. It's how if you look at even, again, a lot of the tech companies we work with, SEO for them continues to be a really high ROI endeavor. And part of it is because people are searching. So it's like, how do you connect with people who are problem aware but don't know solutions yet? Well, SEO is a great way, right? And content is kind of key to be able to educate them and help them find those answers. And then, of course, if someone becomes product aware and they know what you do, even better, then you can talk about your differentiators and so forth. So, yeah, I think, the challenge with content marketing, again, it's kind of a different conversation. It's like, should I be doing content marketing? Well, yeah, yeah. I think it becomes more now, how do I stand out? Because there's so much content out there. So we think this idea of creativity and finding ways to really get your message heard becomes key. So this idea of branded storytelling that goes beyond just like content marketing, kind of where you think about like the old school long form blog posts. This is a whole different level.
Well, you see companies like Tesla, Elon Musk is famous for open sourcing his design, which is kind of what you're talking about when you talk about sort of sharing. The more you share, the better. Albeit in your case in a marketing world. Can you think of some good examples of content marketing? What's a great example you've seen recently of content marketing?
Oh wow, so many good examples. But I'll share two with you that I think really that strike me as very interesting right now. So one of the things that I also invest in startups and look at opportunities from that standpoint. My husband and I are both entrepreneurs, and so one of the things we've seen a huge surge in right now is like the Substack, right? People doing really like, it's kind of back to basics with email marketing, but really good email marketing. And there's this interesting syndicate, and it's based on AngelList, and it's called Not So Boring. And Not So Boring has started, and I love it because essentially what they're doing is they deep dive into these different startups that they're recommending that that they're investing in, and you can join the syndicate, and if you're an accredited investor, be able to invest in them. But I find it fascinating because unlike kind of traditional investing, which is very much closed doors, again, very secretive, these guys are like, here's why we think this is a good or bad investment. And they're breaking down the numbers. They're very openly sharing. They're building this community. So to me, that's a great example, right, of that transparency and perhaps sort of even a niche market, because it's not for everyone. Then a general example, which I'm a huge fan of good marketing, as you can imagine. The creativity is just, it's amazing in every form, whether it's food or whether it's advertising. And so I don't know, Craig, if you've seen the latest ad from Match.com. And they did this great ad, and it was Match.com did this ad on how, the year Satan meets 2020. So they've essentially taken our kind of global dislike for the year, sort of ethos, and they've captured it so well because you see Satan in hell and he's scrolling through his Match, things, and he's like, oh, this girl looks interesting, and he meets her under this like a rainy day bridge, and it's really well done, and he says, are you 2020? And she says, oh, you can call me 2020, and then they unleash mayhem in the world, which is, you see these empty movie theaters, and they're the only ones in there watching, the movie and eating popcorn and working out at the gym by themselves and stealing toilet paper. So it was such a good ad. It was such creative. But I think, that to me is a lot of where things are going, where those lines are blurring, right? From earned, shared, owned. And I said we focus a lot on sort of the earned and the owned. And then you just see all of this converge. And so if you look at it, it's like, yes, it's an ad, but it's an ad that makes you want to share. And it does such a great job with, again, that branded storytelling. And you saw it, I don't know if they released this in the UK, but here in the US on Lifetime, which is a major network, the KFC did a movie with Mario Lopez as the Colonel, which I just thought, and even if the movie frankly sucked, and I haven't watched it yet, so I can't comment on that, what I find fascinating is how many people got talking about KFC, right? And so just to constantly keep your brand out there and people talking about it, again, that like messy middle, right? That being everywhere feeling. And it's kind of what we aim for. I feel like with all our clients, that's always the goal, is to keep them, ever present in the marketplace.
Well, those are 3 great examples. I'll try and find links and put them below if I can find them. Very entertaining, engaging, sort of infotainment, I suppose you'd call it in a way. Yeah. The other thing that's really emerging at the moment is influencer marketing. What's your view on influencer marketing? Is it the new thing, the big thing that's emerging, or do you have different views on it?
So influencer marketing, getting exciting here, getting into the deep stuff. So influencer marketing has been around for a while, right? It's not anything new per se, because we've seen it for about 10 years now. And the idea is that as people kind of lose trust in traditional sources, we look to influencers, right? To be able to figure out, like, from everything from what lipstick shade to buy to what's the best, direct to consumer kind of shoe out there, whatever it may be. So, and companies obviously are understanding this and realizing, hey, it's hard to build a community as a brand. Now, some do it very successfully, but it does take a certain art and science to it. And one of the ways to be able to enhance that is obviously to work with influencers who already have the trust of their community, right? So what I think is interesting and what we're really focused on is B2B influencer marketing, which is completely a different ballgame from the perspective of now it's not more about kind of the fleeting, fluffy stuff. It's for, it's really looking at thought leaders who are respected in that industry, whether that's tech, investment banking, whether that's, fintech, whether that's whatever you like, SaaS, right? Software. So finding people within that group, like that your audience already trusts. And so you see an example like Product Hunt is really interesting, because if you get the right influencers on board, and we run a lot of Product Hunt campaigns and part of our earned media and so forth, is if you get the right influencers, you really 20x your chances of showing up on the homepage, right? You really, like, it gives you this advantage. But I still think we're just scratching the surface when it comes to influencer marketing, especially B2B influencer marketing. Now, influencer marketing overall is changing because, again, anytime there's something new, it's kind of like the Wild West, where everyone is jumping in, they're trying to figure out the rules, prices are all over the place, deliverables, how do you work with these influencers? And as things get streamlined, then you start to see more, start to see more kind of regulation or rubric, it becomes more of a cohesive industry rather than like the Wild West. So I think we're somewhere in the middle of that right now.
Right. And that's a really fine line, though, isn't it? I mean, the influencers, people who have built big social footprints and followings, whether it's on YouTube or Twitch or Instagram or whatever platform, they do that because they're authentic, they're engaging, they build a community around them. And then brands come along and they want to capitalize on those eyeballs, essentially. That's what influencer marketing is all about. And there's a fine line, right? There's a fine line that needs to be balanced between really sort of going fully commercial and alienating your audience versus engaging them more deeply. What advice would you have for creators or influencers? Or do you agree with that statement or not?
Yeah, that's really interesting, Craig. So I think the end game to me always is that it's value, right? I mean, you look at, again, YouTube. How many people are on here that do reviews and their audience loves it? And of course, they know every single product is a review of something, right? It's a brand. They're reviewing Canon. They're reviewing, what, like their latest gadget that's on sale on Amazon. So I don't know if there's necessarily like this automatic allergic reaction to anything commercial. I think at the end of the day, it has to be a fit and it has to be valuable, right? So and it's funny because I'm on both sides of the coin. I do quite a bit of influencer marketing, right? As an influencer in the B2B sort of tech space. So I have a lot of opportunities that come my way. And what I find is that I just have to be really picky and say, what would my audience really love? What are they hungry for? And then it's kind of like, the match made in heaven, right? Because I'm introducing my audience to something where I think that's a great fit, that they would appreciate and enjoy that. And it's helping the brand out. So I'll give you an example. Power MBA approached me. I think they're based out of Spain, and they've got this alternative way of education in there. And it's really smart, right? You kind of have these micro lessons and downloads from some of the top entrepreneurs in the world that you're learning from. And they asked, if I would share that message with they were almost like 2 million on social and a really solid audience of very smart leaders and professionals. And when I looked into it, and I was already familiar with them to some degree, I had people on my team be like, this is so cool. Like, I had requests for employees who wanted to do the program. So it was a very natural fit. It was like, well, of course, like my audience would love this. And they did. Right. So I don't know if there's necessarily just because there's a commercial aspect, it's bad, or if it's paid, it's negative. I mean, so many times as a consumer, I love it when someone is, recommends something that I'm going to enjoy. Like it's funny, some of the biggest Reddit and Twitter threads that you see is like, what's your best purchase under $100? And I think you've seen kind of these questions go out there. And people love it. And the reason they love it is because, again, I don't think that, we don't want to buy. Like we all have needs. We're always looking to, fulfill them in various ways with purchases, again, whether B2C or B2B. But I think it is about honesty, and it is about, again, a good fit. So if I went out there and I tried to, hawk something that I knew wasn't a good product, or that it wasn't going to be a good fit, well, what happens the next time around when I have a message to share? You've diluted your reputation, which in the business world is frankly everything. And you really, you are your reputation.
Sure is. Thanks for sharing the example, Shama, a very personal example as well. And so remain true to your audience and add value. Great advice. Where do you see the future of advertising? What are the big trends that you see that are somewhat being influenced, obviously, by this ever-changing digital landscape? What's your pick? Where's it all going? What does advertising look like?
Part of it, again, I think is where that earned, shared, owned, paid is all blurring, right? So we've got this great graphic that we use at Zen Media, and it has these like concentric circles. And I feel like more of that is merging. So it's hard for anything to stay in its little silo. Another really good example is Ocean Spray, where there was that gentleman on TikTok who made this video, right, drinking this giant gallon of Ocean Spray. And and I think he's on like some sort of skateboard or something, going to work. And, he's lip singing to Fleetwood Mac. It's a really organic it's a wholesome video of a dude who's just trying to, make ends meet, trying to get to work, and he's just sharing that. And I think what was really smart was, of course, Ocean Spray said, this is great. This is already getting virality. Like, how do we connect with this? And so they extended that through their paid, right? Through their advertising. They invited him in, they bought him a truck. So you have to, I think, part of what is so much fun about what I do and what I love that we get to do is finding these moments, right? These sort of golden nuggets that you can then transform into these bigger campaigns. And we've done this over and over for brands, and it's just a lot of fun. I think that's when you can tell that story, when you can connect it with something that is part of the greater ethos that people are resonating with. I think that's the future of advertising, because you get so much more bang for your buck. It's not just about getting that one message out there. It's that sticky factor. It's consistency. When we did these videos, the U.S. Navy is one of our clients. We do a lot of work with Nextcom, and they're great leadership, just awesome people. And one of the things we did was we created these videos where in one of the videos, it's the father and the son are saving all the holidays for the mom that's deployed, right? And usually in every kind of ad or commercial, it's always the guy that's deployed. Rarely do you ever see the focus on the woman being deployed. And so here they had saved up all the holidays that she missed. And then when she walked home and she opens the door, it's like a little bit of all the holidays they've saved for her, you know, the Christmas, Halloween, Thanksgiving. And it's not only is it just really touching, I mean, of course it was, you know, it is an ad in sort of the traditional sense. But I think beyond that, it resonated with so many people because it felt like, you know, and it let people feel like, hey, my story never gets heard. Like this feels like my story is being told, right? And I mean, good advertising does that. It lets you be reflected. So I think there's definitely a push towards that, a push towards more, you know, there's so much talk about, you know, diversity and inclusion, but not just as an afterthought, but really, you know, the best campaigns out there are the integrated ones, right? Not like, oh, we've got a casting checklist. We need a person of color over here, but to think about who is my audience, what are their values, and then how can we sort of incorporate that into the story that we're telling?
Wonderful. So great storytelling, blurring of boundaries, and representing the community that you're trying to reach in a representative way. You know, diversity.
Oh yeah. Oh, Craig, I got to give you another example. I don't know if you could find the links to all these would be great. But again, I'm a huge connoisseur of kind of good marketing advertising. But Carter's, I mentioned to you before we went live that I have a 16-month-old at home. So Carter's is a kid's brand I've gotten really familiar with. But I also love their marketing and advertising. And when everything shut down, they make this great ad, this great video using their employees and their children, right? To kind of tell the story. And it's like got this little nursery rhyme that they created and they got everyone involved. And it was just so touching, right? Because your audience is parents. And so as a parent, you're loving seeing these little kids, these, you know, parents interacting with them, their home. It also speaks to what's happening right now. So they weren't in a studio pretending that, you know, the world is not going by. It was very much a hat tip to what every parent to some level is dealing with work from home and lockdowns. And it's something that we can all relate to. And so, yeah, so I think that was another really good example of kind of advertising that's smart and that's current and that speaks to what's happening in sort of our current, you know, ecosystem.
Super relatable in the zeitgeist. You're giving me some great examples. I'm going to be busy finding these links after this, but I appreciate the examples. They're awesome examples. I'm going to lead or end with a more of a personal question. You started out with nothing. You built a brilliant company. You're a speaker. You're an author. There's probably people watching this starting out in their careers, post-school, post-university, perhaps even considering a pivot in the middle of their career. What's your advice?
Oh, boy. One, and it's funny because I spoke to this young lady who's about 12 years old yesterday who wanted to interview me for a school project. And she was so well-spoken. It gave me so much hope for the younger generation and what's coming up. So here's what I think is really key, right? I think it's very important, sort of practically speaking, to find where passion meets market demand, where just because you're passionate about something doesn't mean there's people willing to pay for it. And this is business. So if you have another hobby, go for it. I'm not do that all day long. But if you're looking for entrepreneurship advice, I think it's very important to find that. What do you love? You know, kind of broadly speaking, and then where is there an interest? Like if I was starting today, honestly, Craig, I don't know if I would start an agency because there are a ton of agencies. I think what we have a lot of going for us is that I got my start when it was beginning, 15 years of experience and case studies and working with clients and like understanding this world, all part of it also being just sort of digital native, right? But if I was starting today, I'd look at it differently. I'd say, okay, where is there a demand that's not being met? Where, what is broken? And when I started, this was broken. And the good thing is, again, you grow, you continue to evolve. So I would say that's important. The other thing is if you are looking at entrepreneurship, I think you have to be a little bit of a masochist, to be completely honest, because you have to love solving problems, because the one guarantee in being an entrepreneur is that every single day there's going to be some challenge that you've never faced before. You know, something that you're just like, what? And if you are someone who doesn't thrive well under that kind of stress, this is not the career for you. So I think, you have to know yourself. It's rare that I meet someone who's an entrepreneur who didn't show entrepreneurial instincts as a child, like sold ice cream sandwiches from the back of a car, I feel like that exists. So, if you do have that and you find that passion, you have that problem and you solve them, the other part of it is going to be sort of the most boring part, hopefully the most boring part of this interview or advice. And that's to be consistent. It's not a very sexy word, certainly in this day and age where we look at a lot of kind of overnight TikTok stars, or it just feels like, wow, someone just, or people will read my book and they'll say, oh my God, I just discovered what you do and this is so cool. And I'm like, yeah, but I've only been at it for how many, over a decade. It's new to you, right? So, and I know, again, YouTube put out some great numbers to how many videos it takes to hit certain users. And so you look at these people and you're like, oh, they've got millions of subscribers. Well, those millions of subscribers, the tipping point was like 3,000 videos, right? So you really have to be committed. And I think you have to stay consistent in the things that you're choosing and doing, because at the end of the day, success is not very sexy. You glamorize it, which is cool. It's good to have aspirations, but it's so much more in the mundane. It's how you do every single task. And I think that really adds up to that macro of whether you're going to be successful or not.
You've got to love the process as well as the outcome. Perhaps I've spoken to many YouTubers and musicians who you wouldn't be accused of misdescribing by saying that they're overnight successes, but if it was an overnight success for most people, it's a very, very long night, right? In your case, 15 years of experience has led you. I've loved this conversation. It's a real example of passion meeting market demand, as you said in your advice, but also meeting true expertise. Shama Hyder, you were an inspiration. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you, Craig. Such a pleasure to be here. Hopefully everybody listening and watching got something out of it, and happy to connect with listeners out there. You can find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, choose your social poison.
All the links are below. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Craig.